everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Really happy to be here. We just flew in from London this afternoon. So just acclimatizing to New York. We're very happy to be here. And is anyone here like completely for the first time? I've been here before. Oh, okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being open-minded and coming. So we're going to do a little bit of chanting, as Hare Prabhu mentioned. So it's the Hare Krishna mantra. We'll sing some other mantras before. And yeah, please follow along. Try to disconnect from the madness of urban city life and see if you can get into a different space of consciousness. Hare Krishna. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
The Bhakti scriptures. And so, after a couple decades of studying, then he took up the renounced order of life, and now he's been given the order to travel all over the world and share this knowledge with everyone. So we're very, very happy to have him here with us. And other than personally, he's a great inspiration in my life. And so everyone, please open not just your ears but your hearts and receive the knowledge Maharaj will share with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So it's a real honor to be here with all of you today, and we have some time to have a discussion. And I think the title we have for this evening's discussion is The 5 Lies of Life. I'm sure that you've been told more than 5 lies in your life. Maybe you've also told more than 5 lies in your life as well. We live in a world of lies, but amongst those lies are beautiful truths as well. And the opportunity of spiritual literature and spiritual wisdom and spiritual discussion is that opportunity to distinguish what is truth from what is illusion. And when we do that, then life becomes beautiful and wonderful in all respects. So we'll have a bit of a discussion on it, see where we go. It's very informal, so at any time if you'd like to share some thoughts, some feelings, or you have some questions, then feel free. Before we begin, we'll just chant some prayers. Before we begin any spiritual discussion, as many of you are familiar, we offer some prayers to our teachers, to our predecessors, to the forms of divinity who we revere, because we understand that the knowledge that we're trying to grasp here is not just knowledge which is understood on an intellectual level. It requires an open heart, an open consciousness, and therefore these prayers invoke that open-heartedness, that ability for us to be receptive to this amazing wisdom. So we'll just say a few prayers here, and then we'll begin our discussion. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachaline Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Begin this evening with a survey. The media, politicians, advertisers. Out of those 3, which one do you trust the most? You have to choose one. The media, politicians, or advertisers? Who would say the media? Got a few there. Politicians? Is that the state of US politics? Advertisers? Relatively less. Okay, interesting. It's so hard to trust in this world. What to speak of the media, advertisers, and politicians? Have you even been told lies by teachers, by people who are leaders in your life? Have you been told lies by friends? Have you been told lies by relatives? Have you been told a lie by your own parents maybe, or your partner? Can you think of one person in this life who's never told you a lie? You might even, maybe, you'd have to stretch it, but maybe you could think of maybe one person, but it would be hard. It's amazing. We're told so many lies, and also we tell many, many lies. We live in a world in which truth is so covered up often. And sometimes we tell lies without even thinking about it. You know, the top 10 lies. I got stuck in traffic. That's definitely a lie. I look forward to seeing you. Really? I forgot. I don't know. It's interesting how it just becomes second nature to us to tell lies. But the interesting thing is, it's not just that telling lies becomes second nature to us, but also accepting lies is also a huge, huge problem for us, because we're very, very impressionable and we have many, many biases in the knowledge that we accept. You see, each one of us are living our lives based on a certain understanding of what is truth. But what we've accepted as truth is highly biased. In the world today, there are different types of biases. One type of bias is probably the most common one, consensus bias. We tend to accept as truth that which many, many other people accept as truth. Much easier to accept that, isn't it? Another type of bias is anchoring bias. We tend to accept as truth the first thing we hear about any particular thing. Doesn't matter often where it comes from, how it comes to us, whether we've actually done any investigation on it, but the fact that it's the first thing you've heard means you're much more likely to accept it as truth. Have that experience? Another type of bias is attentional bias. We tend to accept as truth that which is told to us repeatedly. But just because something is said repeatedly, that doesn't give it any more credibility necessarily. But in our psyche, we have this bias that whatever comes repeatedly, that must carry more weight. Another type of bias is confirmation bias. We tend to accept as truth that which already reinforces our current beliefs. But why should that be a marker of what is true? That's just simply a bias. Another type of bias is framing bias. We're much more likely to accept as something as truth if it's presented in a very beautiful way, or if it's presented by a beautiful person. Do you know that as well? Generally, if someone is very beautiful and attractive, you're much more likely to accept what they have to say. That's psychologically proven. So it's very, very interesting that in our life we've accepted many, many things as truths, but actually they're coming from a biased consciousness. And therefore, what the ancient sages of all the traditions in the world, all the spiritual traditions say, is that perhaps the single biggest problem in people's lives is that they've become distant from the truth. And we see that. If someone tells a lie loud enough and long enough, that lie becomes a so-called truth. If that truth is accepted by enough people, then that so-called truth becomes a culture. And if that culture is somehow perpetuated from one generation to the next, it becomes a tradition. And then people are born into that tradition and they live their life by that tradition, they set their goals by that tradition, they make their decisions by that tradition, when that tradition is based on a so-called culture, which is based on a so-called truth, which is actually a lie. And that is the biggest problem that we're facing in the world today. Can you think of anything that people in the world may have accepted as a so-called truth that's actually a lie? Anything you can think of? Anything you were told growing up?
I was told this a few hundred years ago, if the color of your skin indicated your status as a human being.
Yeah. We've seen over the course of history that on superficial factors, the world has convinced people that you have a certain amount of self-worth based on superficial factors, whether it be skin color, whether it be your gender or other such things. Age. Yeah, age. All of these things, yes. Anything else? Any other so-called truths that are actually a lie in the world today? Yes.
Health insurance keeps you healthy.
Health insurance keeps you healthy. Thank you, yes. Anything else? Yes.
We're not the body. That, we're
That we are the body.
That we are the body, but yeah.
That we're a physical machine, that we're made of matter, and that we're a composite of chemicals.
Gender is a big one today.
And what specifically about gender?
If I want to become a man, I can become a man.
Okay, gender fluidity.
Or no, change my body parts to become a man, and somehow that makes me a man.
Okay, yes.
Same for men becoming
Okay.
women.
Okay, yes. Is there someone here? Okay.
You only live once.
You only live once. Yes. Yes.
Buy something to save. Always they advertise, they do not advertise the real price, how much you save, which is the lower price. It comes with
Okay, there's like an advertising ploy.
always.
Yes, yes.
Like a car, they never mention the real price. They tell you the price, how much you are going to save, which is very low.
They tell you how much you're going to save
Right, like
Okay.
$2,000
when actually you're spending
more.
more. Okay. Yes, thank you. This is all good information to know. Be more savvy on life. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
I would say limitations. I feel like everything has been put in a certain perspective, that everything seems to be extremely limited.
Everything seems to be limited.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what is the specific lie that you...
Well,
or
I guess it's a limitation to what is truth, I think there's a lot of things that restrict other truths from being seen, as in, like, let's say it's a sphere and you only are looking at one part of the sphere, there's the other side. So there's like a limitation on it's been put onto by other people. That's like, this is only truth.
Okay, so there's a limitation in the world as to what we can access as truth.
Yeah, which is like a really complicated lie. Maybe even a lie that people don't know they're lying.
Thank you. Yes.
Life is a zero-sum game and you're either winning or losing. And it's often based on your monetary value.
Yes. that our self-worth is based on a number, our position, our percentage, the number of people following us, or such quantitative factors. Yeah, it's interesting. Einstein said everything that can be counted doesn't necessarily count, and sometimes that which can't be counted counts for more. But we live in such a quantitative, try to measure it that way, yes?
Human needs to eat meat to survive and to be healthy.
Yes, if you don't eat meat, then you won't get enough protein and other such things, and you'll become severely malnourished. Yes, definitely. Yes?
Money will make you happy. Spend more.
Money will make you happy, yes. So spend more, earn more, spend more, enjoy more. Yes. So one last one, yeah.
I was inspired by what he said. I don't know if it's ever told in this way, but the idea that only someone else is happy it's coming out of me. So like if someone else is happy, it's like we all can't be happy.
Oh, okay, that we're all in competition. So if someone else is happy, then that means there's less happiness for me. It's like if someone else is winning, then I'm losing. So therefore, we've got to make sure they lose. Then I'll win. This is the world we live in, dog-eat-dog world. So it's very interesting. I'll share with you something interesting. In the Vedic concept of reality, the cosmic reality goes through 4 ages. In Sanskrit, they're known as Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali. It's kind of like if you think of the 4 seasons. So you have like winter, spring, summer, autumn, like that. You don't say that in America, right? What is it?
Fall.
Yeah. Fall. So the universe goes like that, and it's said that the society stands upon 4 pillars: austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. Where a society has these 4 pillars, then it flourishes. So it's said that in the first age, these 4 pillars of society are intact. But then it's mentioned that as it goes into the next age, the first principle that is lost in society is austerity. People's ability to forego immediate pleasure so that they can achieve something greater in the future. People lose that ability. They just want instantaneous gratification. Then it's said that as it transitions into the next age, another pillar is lost. And the second pillar that's lost in the scheme is mercy. And therefore, by the third age, society is only resting on 2 of the 4 pillars. And then it said, as it goes from the third age to the 4th age, and we're currently in the 4th age, the third principle that's lost is cleanliness. And so, according to the Vedic teachers, we're currently living in the 4th age. It's almost like the winter of the cosmos. And that age is known as Kali Yuga, or the Dark Age. But the interesting thing is that in this age, it's said that there's only one principle on which society is still standing. And what is that? Truthfulness. Now that's a bit puzzling, because we opened this whole talk by talking about how there's so many lies in the world we're living in today, and you don't know who to trust. So let me ask you a question. If according to the Vedic teachers, society is resting on truthfulness, how is that? How can you explain that? Because it seems like we're living in a world which is full of untruth. So in what sense do you think that society is resting upon truthfulness? Does anyone have any idea? Yeah, at the back.
The truth is the only thing keeping it together.
Yes, but the question remains as to, it seems as though there's so many lies in the world today, and who do we rely on for truth? So in what sense is the truth keeping it together? Yeah.
Well, I guess I think once you find the truth, I mean, I think the seek for truthfulness is what I guess gets you liberated. So that's how it's like the last pillar. It's the last thing to hang on to, being like, oh my gosh, like what's the truth? There's so many things that are being said, but it's like, okay, well, the truth is this, maybe this. So it's like the last hope,
It's the last hope. Definitely, that's true. But still, in what sense is truthfulness still in society? Yeah.
If a person is not disciplined or austere, nobody minds that. If they're only take a shower every few days, nobody minds that. If they kill animals or violent, nobody minds that. But if they tell a lie, people get annoyed. Still, there's some sentimental attachment there.
Okay, so you're saying still in this age people value truth.
Yeah. The other three, it's like, we don't care about those three.
Okay. Good. Any other ideas?
Maybe you can connect to your higher self and listen to your heart.
So you're saying the truth exists within you, and if you listen to your heart, then, and in that sense, truth is still present. Interesting. Yes?
So we born, destiny is our DNA. We all came to do certain things. And we are talented according to our destiny. But the society's competition. We join with the competition. That's the problem. We do not listen to our heart, our consciousness, misguided towards the wrong destiny. That is the reason for unhappiness too.
Yes, but my question still remains, in what sense is this society resting still on truthfulness? Yeah, Matanya.
Even though, like Prabhu said, there is a sense of truthfulness, people looking for truth, they understand the last pillar is being gradually diminished.
Yes, but it said that society is still standing on truthfulness. I'm still looking for something more specific. Yeah, at the back. Yeah.
Even if everyone's lying to each other and lying to themselves, the truth is still going to remain untouched. It doesn't rely on people in order to exist like the other three pillars do, I think.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yes,
from a sociological perspective, it's considered that trust is the glue that keeps any society together. Now, and high trust, when trust begins to erode, then societies are unable to function. So even though, it's similar to what Nityananda is saying, is that the value, people value their own truth, that everyone wants to consider that I am following my truth, and so truth in people's lives is a value that all the rest of the other qualities set aside. Truth is still a value that everyone upholds or tries to uphold and understands that without it, everything falls apart.
So similar, you're saying it's still valued. Okay, we'll take one last one. Yeah.
We choose what we're going to, not choose, but we can, with our intelligence or our mind and our experiences, we can tell what's the truth and what's the lie. We can figure it out.
Okay, so you're saying we still have the capacity to find the truth because we have intelligence and so on and so forth. Okay, good. Yeah, all of these definitely could be part of the truth. The major one that's mentioned, in a world which is full of lies, in a world in which it almost seems as though we're being deviated away, one thing still exists. And this one thing is perhaps the most valuable asset of the one seeking truth. And it's this one thing from which the pure, absolute, unadulterated truth is still available amidst an ocean of lies. And what is that one thing which still exists in the world today that we have access to, that can reveal to us what is the truth?
Dharma.
Wisdom, books, scripture. And in that sense, although we're living in a world which is full of lies, because scripture exists, because the words of the sages, the saints, because of the words of divinity, the words of God, still exist in the world today. In that sense, even though we live amongst all of these lies, we can still actually understand what is the truth. Because scriptures are said to establish something called tattva. Tattva literally means that which stands true in all times, places and circumstances, regardless of one's personal leaning or understanding. This is what we call the absolute truth. And so all spiritual traditions place a great emphasis on the reading of spiritual literature, because it's through that understanding and that assimilation of spiritual literature that one can then understand what they've accepted in their life that's actually a lie, and they can actually establish very, very clearly what is truth, so that they can make the right decisions, they can set the right goals, they can respond in the right way, and basically they can navigate their life in such a way as to take them towards ultimate, fulfilling, deep spiritual happiness. And so, of course, here in the Hare Krishna movement, for us, perhaps the most important book of wisdom that we refer to in order to establish the most fundamental spiritual truths is the Bhagavad Gita. Do you have a Gita here? Outside. Okay, a Bhagavad Gita, that would be nice.
Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, we have one here. Okay, great. So right here, so some of you, I'm sure many of you have seen, so this is the Bhagavad Gita. It's 700 verses long. It's written, spoken in Sanskrit. And in this book, what basically happens in this conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, it could be seen in many, many ways. But what basically happens is that Krishna establishes what is truth. And not just establishes what is truth, Krishna also systematically, in every chapter, if you see, he exposes the lies that many of us have accepted and kind of ingrained within our consciousness, either knowingly or unknowingly. And in that way, Krishna helps us to get a very, very deep vision of life. So there are many, many ways to see the Bhagavad Gita, but today I'll just share with you, in every chapter, Krishna exposes a lie and establishes a truth. But I'm just going to give you a taste of some of the lies that Krishna exposes and some of the truths that he then establishes in place of that lie. Just to kind of give you a flavor of some of what is contained within the Bhagavad Gita and why it's such a empowering literature. I'm going to share with you chapter by chapter. So let's say we'll take the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Gita, But just so you get a bit of a background, you can see on the cover here, there are two personalities. One of them, his name is Arjun. He's a warrior. He's just about to start a battle. And as the battle is about to begin, he almost has a moment of crisis, a moment of doubt, a moment in which he begins to wonder whether he really should be there fighting in this battle. And next to him is Krishna, who is his charioteer. So Krishna becomes his guru, the person who he turns to for advice, for enlightenment, for inspiration. And so they begin having this conversation. Now in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjun is basically contemplating giving up his role as a warrior and walking away from the battle, because he sees that ultimately there's going to be incredible suffering, there's going to be incredible loss of life, there's going to be pain, he's going to have to engage in warfare with people he knows, people he loves, and therefore he sees all of this as problematic, and therefore he says to Krishna, I think I should just walk away from the battlefield. Now if we look closely at this chapter, Arjun is basically representing an archetype psychology that many of us accept in our life, which is that problems are bad. How many of you think problems are bad? Generally, that's quite ingrained within us, that we feel problems are bad. And because problems are bad, we need to try to fix them or sometimes just distance ourselves from them. Somehow alleviate them from our life. And while that's not wrong per se, what Krishna is telling Arjuna in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is that problems are there for a reason. Pain is there for a reason. And it's not that in life we should just run away from it, but rather we should learn from it. We should grow from it. We should try to elevate our consciousness from that. And therefore, if we learn to respond to the challenges, the adversities, the obstacles of life in such a way that we understand that they're coming for a reason, and that there's something inherent within those situations which is helping us to evolve into something higher, then our life will become wonderful in all ways. And so Krishna tells Arjuna not to leave the battlefield, not to run away from his problems, not to try to create some distance between himself and this so-called complex situation, but Krishna tells him to stay there, to face it, to learn from it, and to grow from it. And in that way, we kind of begin to look at life differently. Imagine we were able to develop a consciousness in our life where every single time there was a problem, our gut reaction would be, what can I learn from this? What is divinity or what is providence trying to tell me through this situation, through this difficulty that I'm going through right now? Imagine if we could change our consciousness in that way. But the problem is, the lie that we've been told by the world is that problems are bad. But the art of spirituality is to turn problems into progress. The art of spirituality is how to turn pain into purpose. And in that way you can see here, just right at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is basically teaching us a life-changing principle, exposing something which is very, very deep and fallacious within our consciousness. In chapter number 3, Krishna exposes another lie. Arjuna thinks that fighting in the war and trying to win the kingdom is materialistic. And that rather the more noble thing to do, if Krishna wants him to be spiritual, is to walk away from it all and detach himself. But what Krishna tells Arjuna in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is that it's not that spiritual people are unambitious. It's not that spiritual people aren't trying to achieve things in the world. It's not that spiritual people just need to give up all the ambitions and aspirations of life. That is also another lie. People think because spiritual is the opposite to material, spiritual means to distance yourself from the world. But Krishna tells Arjuna, actually that's a lie. It's not that spiritual people are unambitious. Actually, spiritual people are the most ambitious. They want to do something in the world. They want to make a change. They want to be active and involved. But they do it for a different purpose. They do it in a different way. And they do it selflessly. And in this way, spiritual people can be the most ambitious people in the world, but in a way that brings goodness to their life, that brings goodness to the world around them. They're ambitious in the spirit of service, in a selfless way. And in this way, Krishna in the 3rd chapter uncovers another lie, that spiritual people are unambitious. No, that's not true. Spiritual people are the most ambitious, but they do it for a different purpose. In the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uncovers another lie. Here today we talked about success and what constitutes success. And people often measure success by the result. Right? Success is in the result. Therefore, we look at our lives sometimes and we look at all the results and then we measure whether we're successful or not. But in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uncovers that lie. He says success is not in the result. He says the truth is that success is in the endeavor, is in the effort. In other words, if you're trying to achieve something in the world, if you've given your best effort, your attention, if you have the best intention and you've done all you can within your power to endeavor to achieve that thing you're trying to achieve, then it's already a success. It doesn't matter what result comes because you're not in charge of the result. You're not in control of the result. The result is being determined by factors which are beyond your immediate control. And so this is also, these are life-changing principles because most people in their life become very depressed, become very deflated because they look at their results in their life and they then determine whether they're successful or not successful. But what Krishna says to Arjuna is that success is not based on result. Success is based on endeavor. Another lie uncovered by Krishna. If we move on in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 7th chapter, which is entitled Knowledge of the Absolute, Krishna begins to reveal how spirituality is not unscientific. This is also another lie that's been told to us in the world, that spirituality is unscientific. Some people have created an aggressive demarcation between science and spirituality and have separated the two. Whereas Krishna says that spirituality can be entirely scientific. Spiritual truths can be perceived. That spirituality is something which is it's an experiment, just like in a scientific experiment you have a hypothesis, you have an experiment, and then you have a conclusion. The spiritual science is no different, and therefore Krishna explains it begins with hearing, and as you hear spiritual knowledge and then you apply it in your life, then you'll get an observation of that knowledge, and you'll basically perceive these higher truths by your own direct experience. And so this idea that spirituality is not scientific, Krishna begins to expose that. So like this, systematically in the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna does is he helps us to see what is actually reality, distinguished from illusion. And as we begin to rewire our consciousness, absorbing some of these principles, then it basically gives us a different vision of life. And as we walk through life with that elevated vision, then we become more equipped to find happiness. The reason why we don't find happiness in life is because we're making decisions, we're making goals, we're judging ourselves based on parameters which are actually lies. So instead of trying to pursue those things, rather the wise person steps back and first establishes the two true parameters by which they should make decisions, goals, and so on and so forth in their life. And then they go on a more progressive path in their life. And therefore today we're just sharing with you a little bit of this, because this is why spiritual knowledge, spiritual wisdom, spiritual discussion is so powerful. Because before we go out there and act in the world and pursue so many things, a wise person will step back and try to establish what is actually real first. Just like when an arrow, when an archer wants to shoot an arrow, then the first action is that the archer takes the arrow back. Because by taking the arrow back, you can actually aim, you can generate more power, and you can actually hit the target that you're trying to hit. But what happens in the world today is that people just jump out into the world and start pursuing many, many things without stepping back and trying to understand what is actually true, what is actually real, what is actually a worthy thing to pursue in my life. And because that questioning is not done, oftentimes people find that they achieve many of their goals, but it doesn't make them happy. Because they didn't take the time to distinguish lies from truth. And so, yes, let me stop there. These are some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. And perhaps, I can open it up here and see whether anyone may have any questions or comments or any things you would like to. Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned that to be spiritual, you don't have to detach from the world. As I understand, you made some type of oath or commitment to do this for the rest of your life. Can you talk about that decision?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, in the ancient tradition of the East, there are two broad ways in which to practice spirituality. One is renunciation, and the other one is through active life in the world. So, active life in the world means to get married, to have a family, to engage with the world, and to then create a situation for yourself in the world whereby you're functioning in the world, but you're functioning with higher principles and your activities are dedicated towards a higher cause. In that way, you're living in the world, functioning in the world, but it's still a spiritual life because your activities are ultimately aimed towards a higher cause. The other broad way of practicing spirituality is renunciation. When someone renounces the world, then they take vows, for example, of celibacy. They live as monks. But it's not that they detach themselves from the world, because they still engage with the world. Like here I am sitting in front of you as a monk, but we're engaging, we're still contributing, we're still trying to serve. And in that way we're still connected to the world, but we just take a certain lifestyle in which we take vows of living as single celibate monks and not entering that kind of life for the purpose of utilizing that time for serving. So it's not that one path is any greater than the other. Everyone is an individual, everyone has their own personality, and everyone has their own unique path that they have to follow. So for some people, for most people, it's more natural to live the active life in the world, to have a family, have a job, but then to direct it spiritually. And then there may be some who may pursue the renounced path, but it really is an individual decision. But in either case, it's not that they eject themselves from the world, because both of them are still engaged with the world, serving the world, contributing to the world, and in that way still active in the world. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, I've got 1, 2, and then 3. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you mentioned, I think what you said about the problem thing, seeing it as like a opportunity for growth is quite nice. You know, it kind of makes problems not seem like problems, but more as teachers. You know, but that being said, if problems have to do with your perspective, what does one do if they themselves are the problem? You know, how does one go on? I mean, because it's like, okay, then I can change my perspective to see this problem as my teacher. But then if I'm the problem, then I can't just change me being the problem, you know?
Yeah, so you're saying that there are problems in life, but often it's our vision, it's our perception of things, and if that is the problem, my own vision, what do I do about that?
Yeah,
like
it makes you yourself the problem, right?
Well, the good news is that you can change your vision. See, vision in this world is generally made up of two things: your condition and your interaction. In modern psychology, they call it nature and nurture. So say, for example, every single person has a certain vision of life based on their nature, what they were born with and what kind of psychology they were born with, and then nurture, how they were brought up in this world and the different interactions that they had and the different experiences through their life. So generally people's vision of life is made up of their condition, their nature, and their interaction, their nurture. But what we learn in spirituality is that there's a third thing which can actually transform your vision beyond your condition and your interaction, and that's your connection with spiritual wisdom. In other words, by constantly interfacing with spiritual wisdom, by having spiritual discussion, and by implanting spiritual principles deep within your consciousness, what you'll actually see is that your vision will change. That's the great power of spiritual wisdom. And so when you have that spiritual wisdom, when you have that lens through which to then perceive all the obstacles and the difficulties and the complexities of life, then you begin to see it in a completely different way. And that's basically what happened to Arjuna. Because Arjuna in chapter 1 was looking at the armies and became completely deflated. But 45 minutes later, after hearing Krishna, he looked at the same armies from the exact same position. but was completely inspired, enthused, and empowered. And what had changed in that 45 minutes? Connection. His connection with spiritual wisdom. So if you want to change the world, if you want to change your world, you have to change your vision. And how do you change your vision? Beyond your condition and your interaction, which has determined your vision this far, you can now benefit from connection and spiritual wisdom, and that can elevate you beyond. So, in what sense is spirituality a science? Yeah. So as I mentioned, the scientific method is hypothesis, experiment, conclusion, or observation. And so the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna never presents it as a religion. He presents it as a spiritual science. So he says there's a hypothesis. What's the hypothesis? That we're spiritual beings, that there's a supreme spirit who we're connected with in a relationship of love, and that there are a series of practices which, if you employ in your life, you will experience that connection. So that's the hypothesis. So then what's outlined is the experiment. So someone takes up that lifestyle, they take up those practices, they apply that in their life with patience, with determination, in a scientific way. And then in the Bhagavad Gita, in numerous sections of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually explains the transformation that should occur in someone's character once they become spiritually connected. So for example, Krishna will outline some of the qualities, some of how that kind of spiritually connected person sees the world, how they respond to different situations, what kind of desires they have in their mind. And so if someone takes it up, then they will be able to see within their own life how they're changing, how they're transforming, how much they're imbibing those qualities which Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita are the qualities of a spiritually connected person. And so spiritual life is all about transformation. The real proof that this works, that this is real, that this is true, is that one will experience a transformation in their character, in their consciousness. One will look back and say, like, in the last 3 years, while I've been practicing this, I've transformed in this way. And in that way we can see it's scientific, because it creates, there are tangible, observable, measurable changes in someone's character and consciousness. Okay. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I may be wrong, but all of us seeking for happiness, right? Can you picture the difference between material happiness and spiritual happiness? I mean, in a couple words.
What is the difference between material happiness and spiritual happiness? Put simply, material happiness always ends in frustration, and spiritual happiness is ever increasing. When we search for happiness in material things, one of 4 things happens. Number 1, you don't get the thing you're looking for, frustration. Number 2, you get the thing that you're looking for, but it doesn't give you the experience you thought it would give you, frustration. Number 3, you get the thing you're looking for, it gives you a good experience, but then it fades, frustration. Number 4, you get the thing you're looking for, it gives you a good experience, it stays, but along with it comes a bunch of other negative things that you didn't want. Frustration. Now, we can challenge anyone. Tell me any type of material happiness that you have found in your life that's not subject to one of these 4 defects. It was not possible. So Krishna says to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Ye hisham sparsha jaboga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nateshu ramate buddha. Krishna says, whenever you try to find happiness from material things, know that that happiness, material happiness, pregnant within it, is distress. Every time you grasp something thinking it's material happiness, know that that very thing you've grasped, pregnant within it, is distress. It will let you down. That's the nature of it. Adyanta vanta konteya. It has an adi, a beginning, and an anta, an end. And therefore Krishna says, Na deshu ramate Buddha. If one is a Buddha, an intelligent person, they won't continue to try to find happiness there. They'll look elsewhere. So, most people know this. Most people know this, but the problem is they don't have an alternative. If you ask most people, they know that material happiness doesn't make them happy. Or material pleasures don't make them happy. They know that. But the problem is they don't have an alternative. Therefore, what do you do? There's nothing else to do. You have to do something after all. So, that is why what we're trying to do in the world is provide an alternative. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Yes.
Maharaj, I understand that material happiness ends in frustration, but I'm not accepting that money doesn't buy you happiness.
So you don't want to accept that money doesn't buy you happiness. It's hard. It's hard for you. No, like we say, like there's a famous poem, no? Like, money can buy you a bed, but it can't buy you sleep. Money can buy you a house, but it can't buy you a home. Money can buy you power, but it can't buy you genuine respect of others. You see what I mean? So the idea is that money can get you things, and it's not that those things are useless. Those things are useful, but those things in and of themselves don't give you what you are actually looking for. So here we are as Hare Krishna saying money doesn't make you happy, but if you give us money, we'll accept it. Not because we think it will make us happy, but because we recognize money can be utilized, but then along with spiritual knowledge and along with other deeper types of endeavors, then those things can actually transform into something which satisfies the heart. So we're not saying money is useless, we're not saying money is unnecessary, we're not saying money is not needed, but we're saying money in and of itself won't be able to solve the vacuum within the heart, won't be able to fill that vacuum. That's what we're saying. Does that make sense? Yes.
Going with the money talk over here. So like my little sister jokes and she says, yes, I'd rather be crying in a mansion than in like a shed. So like when I tell her like it won't make you happy, she's like, but I'd rather be crying, in my mansion. And so I guess my question is like, is it okay to have, or not okay, but like to have the desire to have maybe a more affluent life or like have these things, does that take away from your spirituality? Or if you're just simply want that life but at the same time acknowledge that it's just temporary and it's not real, then could you still, you know, be in that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is there a problem in pursuing material goals, material aspirations? You're saying, is that a problem for your spiritual growth? Not necessarily. But to achieve anything in this world requires time, it requires energy, it requires effort. And if we try to have very, very lofty goals of what we want to achieve in the world, then that means time, energy, and effort which could be used for higher endeavors is being lost. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. But what if we, like all the people that are super spiritual, like, okay, I'm not gonna make money, and then all the people that don't care about the world make a lot of money, and then they use that money to make the world worse, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's different. It's like definitely those, that's why I said those, it's not that spiritual people are unambitious. Spiritual people are also ambitious, but they're starting with the understanding that I'm going to be ambitious, I'm going to achieve things in the world for the purpose of serving the world, for the purpose of making the world a better place. Do you see what I'm saying? So they've understood that from the beginning, that now I'm going to try and rise to the height of my career and you know, be in this position of influence so that I can serve the world. So they're starting with that consciousness. But if someone doesn't start with that consciousness, they may rise to that position and in that they may just never really get to any spiritual consciousness because they've just been preoccupied with rising to the heights of wherever they wanted to go. So therefore in the Christian tradition it's said, no, what profiteth a man who gains the whole world but loses their soul? So in the process of trying to achieve so many things in the world, we forget to invest time and energy into understanding why we're in this world. So therefore, generally it's recommended for spiritualists that simple living, high thinking. That there's a need in the world to simplify your life so that you can free up the headspace to actually contemplate deeper things. But once you've understood your spiritual essence, then you can go back into the world and achieve many things, but with an elevated conscious state. So then you're going back into the world and you're not part of the, you know, the rat race, but you're kind of doing it for a higher purpose. Yes.
Just piggybacking on my 3 questions. I've heard before the difference between material happiness and spiritual content is that it's involving Krishna, the higher source of it, Krishna, Jet, his original name, and dovetailing stuff with that. For instance, a shed versus a mansion. Like if the mansion can be a bigger kitchen to make more prasad, or storage for his books, or more space to hang pictures, then that's great, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, the basic difference between material happiness and spiritual happiness is explained in a Bengali verse. Atmendriya priti icha tare bolikam, Krishnendriya priti icha dhare prema nam. That there are 2 things in the world, lust and love. Lust is basically material happiness, love is basically spiritual happiness. And what is the definition of lust? That which is done to satisfy one's own senses. And what is the definition of love? That which is done in selfless service to the divine and everyone and everything in connection with the divine. That's basically So when it's there's this, I think there's this samurai tale where the disciple comes to the guru and he asks his guru, what's the difference between heaven and hell? So his guru, like with the sweep of a hand, gives him a vision and says, this is hell. And in hell, it was kind of dinner time and everyone had come around the dinner table and everyone looked completely emaciated. And everyone had a long arm, which was like a spoon. And so the soup came, and so they were trying to eat, but they just couldn't eat. And it was so frustrating because the spoon was too long and they couldn't get it in. And then he said, wow. And then he gave him a vision of heaven, and it was dinner time, and it was the same table, and it was the same people with the long spoons. And here they all looked healthy. I was thinking and then as they sat down, they saw that what was happening in heaven is that they were using the long spoon to feed the person opposite them. And he said that's the difference between hell and heaven. It's the motivation, it's the positioning of one's consciousness, and that's the difference between material and spiritual happiness. Therefore, someone who's material and spiritual, even externally, they can be seemingly doing the exact same thing, but they can, because their motivation is different, they're at polar opposites. It's almost like back in the day when you used to have the cassette tapes. Then you've got two spools moving, and they're moving in the same direction, in the same way, but one is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the other one is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's like the spiritual person is reducing all of their karma and complexity in this world, and the other person is just gaining more and more. But externally, they just seem to be doing exactly the same thing. Because it's all about the orientation of one's consciousness. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So, so I was like, so okay, going back to the point you made of the practice being a science, right? So like you get the hypothesis, then you get the experiment, then you get the result, right? And now you take the same premise with every so many religions, so many perspectives of God, and then you see a lot of practitioners, but a lot of failure, and then I think with every religion you can get that, and I think even there's been cases with this movement where that has happened, right? So then, is it even the science? Is it even the practice? But going back to what you were saying right now, it has to do with this, with the consciousness the practice is done.
Yes.
So then at what point, what even is, why does the truth even matter? Like at that point, if the practice doesn't even matter, but the consciousness, the way you're doing things matters more than the actual practice, then what even is truth? What even, like selflessness, right? Like that's real spirituality, that's real love, selflessness. But then if you don't know what the idea of God is it considered spiritual if you're still selfless, like sincerely? Or because I think that heaven or hell explanation was beautiful, But then, yeah, I guess that, I don't know.
So you're saying if it's all about consciousness, if it's all about having the right direction of consciousness, then do the acts even matter?
Yeah, in a sense, because I guess if it's selflessness, and then it depending on what the action is, like it transcends the good or the bad, right? Because what may seem as bad, like it's like the teacher thing, like problems are a teacher, So then if it's done in the right consciousness, and the consciousness of love, and the consciousness of selflessness, to everyone else and to all that is, or Krishna, then
in the highest state, that's actually true. There's a famous story of Krishna who went to the house of one of his devotees, And she was so enthusiastic to serve him that when he came, she kind of started peeling the bananas to offer to him, but in her ecstasy, she threw away the banana and gave him the banana skins instead. And he was like totally like okay with that. So it was almost like the act was kind of like, it became inconsequential because it was all about love. So in the highest state, that's actually true. But in our state where we may not have that pure selflessness, engaging in certain types of acts which are recommended by the divine help us to engender that kind of selflessness. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So so therefore the scriptures involve certain activities, certain kinds of ways to express your devotion, which will help you to nurture that devotion and build that selflessness. But you're totally right. Once you develop that highest, purest state of selflessness, naturally all of one's acts will be pleasing because it's just all being pervaded by a complete love for the person you're serving. So yeah, that's a good point.
We
I
could
can
take
see
one
more hands.
We could take one more question.
One more question. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm actually curious on the point of the, I don't know if you said, your little sister said rather cry to bitch. I was thinking, okay, so there are devotees who are sannyasis, like you travel around the world, preach. You got some devotees who work, who support the temple, or just use their material skills to help. What are some metrics someone can use to figure out if their material life is dragging them from spirituality, or if it's actually helping them from their spirituality?
So what are the metrics by which we understand if our material life is taking us away from spirituality or taking us towards spirituality or towards God? How do we understand? Well, as one advances in the spiritual path, certain things should happen. One's desires should change, one's character should change, one's ability to absorb themselves in spiritual practices should increase. So these are the parameters by which we understand that someone is moving towards a deeper relationship with the divine. They have deeper faith, they have more divine character, they have more natural taste for spiritual practices. So if one is practicing whatever lifestyle they're practicing, all they have to do is regularly introspect and ask themselves, am I moving in the right trajectory in all of these areas? Are my desires changing and becoming more pure? Is my character moving from envy to appreciation, anger to tolerance, lust to love? Is my ability to absorb myself in spiritual practice increasing? If one sees all of these signs, then one can understand that, yeah, I'm moving forward in my spiritual journey. But if one doesn't see these signs, then there's a good chance that the material life that they've accepted has become a diversion from the inner transformation that's helping them to move towards God. And so then one may need to look more closely as to what can be changed. Like that. Does that help? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be with you all. I appreciate that. And I
You're going to lead kirtan. So we'll do another little kirtan. kirtan, and then we'll have just some announcements afterwards. So for the kirtan, it's going to be a stand-up one. So everyone on the floor can stand up and move the cushions to my right and your left.